Well, can't rely on a soundtrack this time, can we? So Fear Street Part 3, 1666 tells the origin stories of Sarah Fear and the witch's curse that she has placed on Shadyside. Well, we are here, everybody. We are at the third and final chapter of Fear Street. This is Part 3, and it takes place in 1666, if the title did not give you that hint already. Who knows if we're going to get more Fear Street. I don't know if this is going to be the last that we see of this series. I have a good feeling we're probably going to see this again in a year or two, but nonetheless, this trilogy is now wrapped up. I had a lot of fun with 1994. I've done reviews for both of these. I'll put cards up for both of them up here over the next couple of minutes. But enjoyed the first chapter while thinking that maybe it lacked a little bit here and there with some of the realism. And Part 2, I enjoyed that camp slasher aesthetic. I enjoyed the soundtrack, but thought that the Carnage Candy was a little bit of a disappointment for me. So I've been up and down with this series so far. How do I land on this third and final chapter? Is it better than the other three? Is it the worst of the three? Does it fit comfortably somewhere in the middle? Let's talk about it. So starting right off with the positives for Fear Street 1666, I will say this one probably has the best story thus far of the three. I was the most engrossed in this story because the first 2/3 is telling the origin stories of this witch's curse that we have been haunted by throughout this entire franchise thus far. And we finally get the answers that we have been asking for 2 movies so far. And then it wraps back up with going back to 1994 and showing how they solve all the problems that have been haunting us since the first chapter. So I thought it was a nice balance there to where it felt like there was a good amount of story in 1666 and there was a good amount of story in 1994 without either one of them feeling shortchanged by the other. And I was invested in the peril of Sarah Fear and the whole witch hunt. And I've always been pretty interested in the Salem witch hunts and that whole era where you could just scream and point at somebody and all of a sudden now they're evil and we have to hang them. Start to see a lot more of that kind of history repeating itself in culture nowadays, it seems like. And I was mostly satisfied with the story directions that they went back to in 1994 and how they decided to wrap up the trilogy by looping back to the beginning. And while I will say this one probably has the least amount of carnage of the three, so if you're here for the gore and the kills, this one's probably going to be the least satisfying for you. I will say this one has by far the most disturbing image that I have seen in the trilogy thus far. So without spoiling anything, just keep your eyes out for it. As far as capturing an era, I think they did the best job here. You know, they didn't just rely on a soundtrack, nor could they if they wanted to. So they really had to nail the dialect and, you know, the way that people interacted back then and the whole aesthetic of the 1600s and getting back to that very derelict, technologyless way of life. And for me, whenever I started watching this, I instantly believed that this was in the 1600s, where I struggled a little bit with both of the last chapters in certain aspects. So as far as era recreation and capturing the aesthetic of an era, they did great here. Moving on to the mixed aspect, the one thing that really bugged me in here while I understood what they were trying to do is that I don't necessarily agree with the fact of taking the cast of 1994 and just putting them into the bodies of the characters of 1666. I think that would have made somewhat sense for just the character of Dina seen through the eyes of Sarah Fear, because she's the one that, you know, activates that whole premonition at the end of the second chapter. So I would have understood visually what they were going for by putting the Dina actress into Sarah Fear, but putting all the other actors like her brother and the Stranger Things chick, the redhead, forgive me for not knowing her name, putting all of them into the side characters, for me, that kind of felt a little too American Horror Story to me. I mean, we didn't do that in 1978. Why are we doing that here? I think that it would have been a much better standalone chapter if all of those roles, arguably even Sarah Fear, were new actors and were different actors, or maybe even other actors that we recognized.
For Shadyside. What the hell?
You see it now.
Sarah! I understand that they were trying to kind of parallel some of the stories. They were trying to parallel some of the struggles that Dina was going through with some of the struggles that Sarah Fear went through, and making her the literal face of Sarah Fear was probably the laziest and easiest way to convey that image to convey that message to the audience. I like to think that horror audiences are a little bit smarter than that, but maybe I'm giving them too much credit. Nonetheless, I understood I just didn't think it was necessary. Now moving on to the negatives. I don't think that when they get back to 1994, some of the rules that they invent and then break, that kind of got on my nerves a little bit. Now you could argue that with 1994 a little bit, you can even argue that with 1978 a little bit. This series has not been very ironclad with the realism of its rules. It tends to just make shit up and then kind of slide underneath that and hope that you don't really notice it. There's this whole rule going on in the third act of this movie regarding this character's blood and how they're able to use that as a weapon and as a distraction and as a trap, and it was a cool idea, but they used it in so many different ways and then broke that logic in so many different ways within seconds that whole third act, I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna watch what happens. There's no more connecting the dots. I thought that the ultimate revelation about how things went about in 1666, you know, who the villain is and whether or not Sarah Fier was actually the bad guy and all of that, all these questions that we've been raised since the first chapter that we've been waiting for them to answer, I felt like the answers they gave us were fairly obvious by about half an hour into this movie. I knew exactly what reveals were gonna happen. I knew exactly what characters were gonna be different than what we realized, so I might be on an island with that one. We'll find out in the comment section, but for 3 movies of building questions, I wish I could have been surprised a little bit more, because I wasn't at all. And my final negative is I wish they came up with a more compelling reason for why Sarah Fier was a part of this witch hunt, why she was the target of this. Please, God, do not misinterpret what I'm about to say here, because I enjoyed what they did with this whole theme and storyline in 1994. Putting it to where her, you know, taboo relationship with the girl that she is girlfriends with in 1994 is the catalyst for why they had the witch hunt. You know, somebody saw them doing some naughty stuff and all of a sudden now she's the target. I mean, there's some other layers to it. I felt like that was a little bit of a repetitive thing for this series to do. I didn't think that it was necessary for them to do that a second time, because it just makes it feel like at this point they're trying to hammer some kind of a message in. And that's kind of a sticky situation to do nowadays, because so many movies hammer forward with the message, where I felt like 1994 did a good job of putting it in the background, making it this compelling thing that would actually happen in 1994 and give it a little bit of added depth to those 2 main characters. Here, it's quite literally, oh, that makes you a witch. We need to hang you because you're doing this. And it's just, that's a little on the nose. A little on the nose for me.
Sarah Fier, you know nothing good comes from those woods after sundown.
Again, absolutely nothing against representation. Like I said, 2 chapters ago, I was on board for it. I just felt like here wasn't utilized as good and felt a repetitive utilization to do that again, just 2 movies later. But all in all, guys, this was probably my favorite of the 3, but by a nose, it was my favorite over 1994. I think that overall, the trilogy was a satisfying trilogy. I enjoyed it. I want to see them do some more. I think this could be a really cool thing to have on Netflix once a year, once every 2 years. So there's a ton of these books, so there's a lot of different directions that they could go, and I'm ready for it. But as for this individual movie, loved the era capturing that they did back in the 1600s. I enjoyed all of the visualizations of some of the disturbing imagery that they went for, getting away from the slasher gore and going more for psychological, almost like Ari Aster witch type visualizations. Liked all of that. Just felt that they slipped a little bit with some of the reveals, not making them as surprising. And my God, would it kill you to follow your own rules? That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. So if you've been on board with Fear Street thus far and you want to know whether or not the 3rd chapter sticks the landing, I think it mostly sticks the landing. So definitely check this thing out on Netflix today and stream it. So what do you guys think of Fear Street Part 3, 1666? What do you think? Is this your favorite, your least favorite, somewhere in the middle? Are you looking forward to another Fear Street, or do you think this was a gigantic misstep and just, nope, try something else? Try back to the drawing board, Netflix. Let me know all your thoughts down below and we will talk about it. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button so you can check out all of my future reviews. Hopefully this weekend I could find the time to go out and check out this new escape room movie, but we do have Dexter Season 4 coming this weekend, so if you're a Dexter fan, absolutely subscribe so you can check that out. And we got a reveal of Chucky. I don't know if I'm gonna do anything with that, but it's exciting nonetheless. So thank you guys for watching as always, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.